What's up, guys? Nick here, lead inspector at the Gadget Inspector, and I'm fresh off of my time reviewing the Motorola Razr 60 Ultra. Also thinking about getting ready for Galaxy Unpacked that's happening next week on July the 9th. And I was looking at the specs on the Z Flip 7, and I'm like, boy, this phone might just be dead on arrival. All right, why did I say that? And I know here at the Gadget Inspector, we kind of hang our hat on, we do not judge devices on a spec sheet. But the differences in the spec sheet are so wild between the Flip 7 and the Razr 60 Ultra that it is giving me some cause for concern. Let's look into it. All right, so here we have the Z Flip 7 and the Razr 60 Ultra. The dimensions are pretty similar, even though I would give the edge to the Flip 7 because it's supposed to be a little bit wider. The materials for the screens are pretty similar. We got IP48, all the same. Yeah. Now, let's get to the display. So, strike one for the Flip 7. It's very rare that we see Samsung have a worse display than one of its competitors in the same kind of niche. So we have a LTPO AMOLED for both of these, but the Razr 60 screen gets a little bit brighter and has a higher refresh rate, and that is true for the inner and outer screens. As well as for the inner screen, it has a higher pixel density. That means you're going to get a sharper image with Razr 60 Ultra. We don't really know the pixel density of the outer screen. Like I said, it's going to be, I think, a new screen for the Flip 7 on the outer screen. But it's got a lot to compete with here for the Razr 60 Ultra. All right, the platform. Flip 7 might have an edge with One UI 8. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then memory. So here we go. The Flip 7 only goes up to 512 gigabytes and 12 gigabytes of RAM. The Razr 60 Ultra goes all the way up to 1 terabyte with 16 gigabytes of RAM. Okay. That's very interesting, right? And let's move on down to the cameras. This is probably one of the biggest differences in these two phones. Motorola gave you three 50 megapixel cameras. No telephoto in either one of them. I definitely judge the Razr 60 Ultra on that. The Z Flip 7 is going to have the same pitfall apparently. But the Razr 60 Ultra can film all the way up to 8K. Now, I'm never going to film at 8K, but the fact that it can do that means you're getting more with this hardware setup. Yeah, the selfie camera on these things was never even anything to write home about for the Flip styles. But Motorola actually gave you a 50 megapixel selfie camera. Hats off to them. Alright, speaker, I do think that the Samsung setup will be better than Snapdragon sound. Comms, pretty much the same. All this stuff pretty much the same until we get to the battery. And oh my god, what a difference here. The Galaxy Flip 7, it's kind of weird because I see it reported at 4400 on the Samsung website, that the Geekbench, I'm seeing reports of 4174. Okay, we'll see what happens once it gets released and unpacked. But it's still going to be really tough to beat that Razr 60 Ultra. 4700 milliamp hour, 68 watt wired charging, 30 watt wireless. I mean, the wireless charging is faster than the wired charging for the Flip 7. That's out of control. Got Geekbench scores and Antutu scores down here. We don't really know what the Flip 7 is going to do. But yeah, I mean, this 4700 milliamp hours is more than the Galaxy Fold series. I highly doubt that the Flip will touch that. Yeah, that's a big difference, especially if we're talking about phones that will be priced similarly. There would be very little reason for you to get a Flip 7 when this Motorola Razr Ultra exists. But if we know Samsung, they probably have a trick up their sleeve, and I will give you 3 ways that Samsung could potentially still, with these specs, put out a better product than what the Razr 60 Ultra is. So how can Samsung compete when they're clearly going to be way behind on the specs with the Razr 60 Ultra? All right. One way, I think, is going to be with One UI 8. So with these flip style foldables, I feel like no one has really gotten the marriage between the inner and the outer screen right yet. Now I will give Motorola credit that right now they are still way ahead of Samsung. It's one of those weird losses that Samsung is taking right now because they typically have better software than most of their competitors. Flip 6 outer screen is pretty unusable when compared to the Motorola Razr series. So we'll see if One UI 8 in combination with Goodlock probably will have some fixes for that makes that screen a lot more utilizable and hopefully a lot more seamless when you transition between the inner and outer screen. If anyone can do it, Samsung can. The second way that Samsung could possibly compete is in performance. With these two phones having the same chip, the difference I think is going to be heat management. So the Razr 60 Ultra doesn't do a great job dissipating heat from that Snapdragon 8 Elite. Samsung is known for using vapor chambers that do a really good job of dissipating that heat and therefore being able to get more performance out of those chips. They're also probably not going to have a standard Snapdragon 8 Elite. They're probably going to have a Snapdragon 8 Elite tuned for Galaxy. So when the benchmarks come out, it will probably be a full step ahead of the Razr 60 Ultra, even though it doesn't have as much RAM. The third way that Samsung can really still come in competitive and offer something competitive to the Razr 60 Ultra is with camera software. So we already know there's a huge loss that they're going to take on the hardware department. There's nothing they're going to be able to do about that. But if they offer pro-level video controls, whereas the Motorola Razr doesn't, even though that thing can record all the way up to 8K, I think that the Flip 7 can still steal some customers that are both looking at these phones. But let me know what you think. Are you considering a flip style foldable this year? If you were going to get one, which one would it be? Would you looking at the Flip 7? Are you looking at the Razr 60 Ultra? Are you waiting for the Flip 7 to come out before you make a decision? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, until the next one, peace out.